All right, let's get right into it. Picture this. It's November 16th, 2023. We're in a Florida courtroom. What was supposed to be a totally normal, run-of-the-mill status hearing is about to go completely off the rails, turning into one of the most unbelievable judicial showdowns you can possibly imagine.
And it all starts with this one single question. Judge Diego Madrigal III looks at defendant Kelli Lynch and asks, who the heck is Rusty? Now, Rusty is Rusty Miller, a friend who was helping her out. He's not a lawyer, not a witness, not involved in the case at all. But with that one question, the fuse is lit, and a routine hearing just turns into a full-blown personal interrogation.
And just like that, the tension in the room absolutely explodes. The judge starts screaming at the defendant, Kelli Lynch, "Look at me when I talk to you." But here's the crazy part. His anger isn't really even directed at her. It's this all-out attack on Rusty Miller, a guy who isn't even in the room. So this brings us to the first massive allegation from that day, the claim that the judge literally invented a felony charge against a private citizen, right there from the bench. Here it is, the judge's on-record accusation. He claims that Rusty Miller was filing motions in the court file, which he says is the unlicensed practice of law, a third-degree felony in Florida. And then he says, almost like a gotcha moment, he did the state the favor of signing them. Well, here's the thing. On the left, you see the judge's claim. Miller signed and filed motions. But on the right, you see what the court record actually shows. And spoiler alert, Rusty Miller never filed or signed a single thing. The motions were either filed by someone else entirely or signed by the defendant, Kelli Lynch herself. You know, the difference was so obvious that the prosecutor in the room, State Attorney Walsh, actually tried to step in and correct him. But do you think the judge paused to check the facts? Nope. He just doubles down with this sarcastic remark. But it doesn't stop there. Not even close. The hearing is about to take another wild turn, because the judge is about to reveal that he's been doing some digging on his own, acting less like a judge and more like a private investigator. And this is a jaw-dropper. Judge Madrigal admits, right there on the record, that he pulled up his criminal history. Think about that. This wasn't evidence somebody brought to court. This was the judge, on his own, conducting what's called an extrajudicial investigation into a private citizen who had nothing to do with the case. He then proceeds to read this laundry list of old charges from Miller's past out loud for everyone to hear. Now, here's the kicker. These records were sealed and expunged. Legally, they were supposed to be private, completely irrelevant. Reading them into the public record was so out of bounds that it actually caused bailiffs to start searching the courthouse for Miller. And right in the middle of reading out this private information, the judge stops and asks the defendant this deeply personal question. The whole thing just seems designed for one purpose: to smear Miller's name and completely intimidate Kelli Lynch. So what do you do with all this pressure you've just created? Well, let's see how it was then used as a weapon directly against the defendant. The judge starts doing the math out loud. He calculates that Kelli Lynch is staring down a possible 80-year prison sentence. And he makes it crystal clear that he blames her for even thinking about withdrawing her plea and says it's all because of Rusty's advice. The message couldn't be clearer. Listen to your friend and you might just die in prison. Then he starts trying to isolate her. He calls Miller a knucklehead, painting this picture of a guy who's just going to forget all about her the second she's behind bars. The strategy seems pretty obvious. Cut her off from her support system and make her feel totally and completely alone. And then we get to what might just be the most shocking moment in the whole hearing. The judge makes Kelli Lynch take an oath, forcing her to publicly disown her friend and promise not to take any more advice from him. This is a direct challenge to her First Amendment right to associate with whoever she wants. And he doesn't just ask her to agree. No, he demands she say the words out loud so the court reporter can get it all down. This coerced, public statement is now a permanent part of the legal record. So you take all of this, the made-up accusation, the private investigation, the forced oath, and it all leads to one huge legal question. Can a judge actually be held accountable for this kind of behavior? At the center of that question is this really powerful legal concept called absolute judicial immunity. It's basically a shield that protects judges from being sued for their decisions so they can rule without fear. But, and this is a really big but, it's not a blank check. It only covers judicial acts, not every single thing a judge decides to do. You know, this analogy just perfectly sums up the legal argument. Imagine a referee literally stops a football game, runs up into the stands, pulls out his phone to look up some fan's private medical records, and then reads them out over the stadium loudspeaker, all because that fan was criticizing his calls. That's kind of what the lawsuit is alleging happened here. The lawsuit basically argues that the judge's immunity shield shatters for three big reasons. First, playing detective isn't a judge's job. Second, he had zero legal authority over Rusty Miller, who was a complete stranger to the case. And third, the whole thing was allegedly driven by malice, that this was retaliation because Miller was helping to expose misconduct. And this really lays out the entire legal game plan. The argument is simple. When a judge takes off the robe and acts like an investigator, he leaves his immunity hanging in the closet. Each of these points is designed to prove that the judge wasn't acting like a judge at all. He was acting way outside the law. And then there's this quote from a later hearing that's being presented as the smoking gun. The judge seems to say, on the record, that his whole problem with the case is tied directly to her buddy Rusty filing stuff. This is being argued as a straight-up admission of his retaliatory motive. And at the end of the day, all of this leaves us with this massive, fundamental question about our entire system of justice. We need our judges to have authority and independence, of course, but we also need them to be held accountable. So where do we draw that line between a judge's power and a dangerous abuse of it?